So first things first, how do we compare poems? The first thing I would suggest is you read both poems once. Whether you're given next week, of course, it'd be 2 poems you know. It'd be 2 poems you know, which is going to be really lovely. But if you don't know the poems, that's absolutely fine. So the first thing I would suggest is read through both poems once and just enjoy them. Hear them in your mind. Now, I cannot recommend this enough. This is a really useful skill, regardless of whether you're doing poetry or Chaucer. Read through what they've given you. Read through the poem. Read through the extract if you are doing Chaucer. And that's the first thing I would suggest, and enjoy it. You need to hear them in your mind. If you were reading a book that you had chosen that you really enjoyed, you could lose yourself in that book. Now, wherever you are, whether you are in an exam room or whether you're at home, use that natural adrenaline rush, which you will have. Use that natural adrenaline rush, which is natural, and that anxiety will mean you can read superhumanly, you can think superhumanly fast. Actually, anxiety about exams will mean you can do more than you could ever do before. So first things first, anxiety and a little bit of worry for exams is quite helpful. You will think quickly. Your body will be poised to help you be ready to learn, to listen, to work quickly. Without that kind of little bit of worry, we would be slower off the mark. Lose yourself in the poems. Then ask, my favourite thing, ask questions of the poem. Let me just close the door. So ask questions of your poems. Ask questions. What do you see? What do you hear? What's going on? What do I hear in this poem? And read the poems that you know as if it was the first time you've read them. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I read a new book, it takes me a little bit of time, but I love the sounds, the smells, see it, hear it. Then, what's my favourite line? Which line strikes me? Why? And why? Now, in the real exam, you will then be accessing a poem you don't know. And what an exciting opportunity in the real exam. Next week, you'll be accessing a poem that you've done and taught yourself. Well done. Well done. That's a massive task. To have understood a poem on your own is a very impressive task. What's your favourite line and why? Is it the emotion or an image? And then, when you've enjoyed them and you've lost yourself in that, then, by the way, I have not mentioned techniques once. Please note, let's just put a little note. I have not mentioned techniques. I'm going to say this a lot through the next year, or whoever you have will say this too. I don't want you to talk about techniques. I don't want you to think about techniques at this stage. If we start thinking about, oh, well, the alliteration there, we're tending to do what we might do at GCSE, where we feature spot. I want you to respond gut instinct to these poems. These are poems that are new and they are now, and they're about stuff that affect you and affect me. And we need to be personal with them. I don't want to know about whether they've got alliterative sibilants, onomatopoeia, enjambment, rhyme at this stage. The third thing is compare. What is similar? What is different in these poems? Are they both angry? Are they sad? How do they feel about this issue? Now, later on, we're going to deal with disappointment and guilt. How do they feel about guilt? Is it guilt now that they feel, or guilt that someone else feels? So what's interesting is I want to know if it's the guilt that they feel or someone else in a generation before feels. So that's what I want to know. Is it guilt that they are experiencing very personally and directly, or is it guilt from generations gone by? Or if they're disappointed, is it they are disappointed for themselves or disappointed for someone else? And that then means that you can compare the similarities and the differences. Now, a big one. Do they start the same but end differently? Really interesting one. Often, poems might start differently and end the same, or they might start the same and end differently. Maybe by the end, like, what's it? Effects. We realise he feels guilty about leaving his mother. He's looking at this little bag, and actually we realise he feels dreadful, that this is all he has left. And he didn't realise that at the beginning because he looked down on her. And there's a gradual realisation. And that's really powerful too. By the end of the poem, have we made a discovery about them? We made a discovery about ourselves. And only after all of those things do we consider how. Only after all of that do we think both use the same image. Only after the comparison do we think about the terminology. That AO1 is the way you write and whether you can answer the question. You don't get marks for terminology for the sake of it. I want you to answer the question, and the question is asking you to compare. In fact, the first word you will look at is compare. So that's what I want you to focus upon. That's where I want the drive to be, is answering the question and comparing. Then how? Do they both a fluent structure? But you can't say unstructured. No poem's unstructured, because otherwise it would just be words on a page like you would a journal, okay? Do they both use a fluent structure? Do they both use similar images? An underused technique is tone. I discussed that on Monday. In all your texts, tone is so important. A different tone. And hopefully that should be a really good way of going about comparison.